All right, everybody. So you should by now have JSON server set up. And on initial page load, you should be fetching the initial items from db.json and placing them into application state so that they appear on the page. When the user submits a form, you should be sending a post request to add an item to db.json and then also render it on the page. Now it's time to do a delete request. And the steps are actually, they're fairly similar to how they were previously, and I'll show you what I mean. But first, one thing to note, the delete item button will not be on the card. It'll be on the item modal. So that'll be one of your steps that you'll have to do. And the steps in general, they are pretty similar to what you just did setting up post requests. So with post requests, it starts here with a user opening the modal and then filling out the form and submitting it. We call a function in app.js, handle add item, something like that, handle add item, and we pass it the input values, the things that were submitted. This function calls another function that we have created inside our API file and passes it the input values. That function makes an HTTP request, like this post request here, includes the input values in the body of that HTTP request, and sends it to the database. Let's move this up here. Then we get the response. That's this line coming back to our application. The response is received again by this add item function. We parse it to get the JSON, and then that JSON gets returned to the handle item function. At that point, we're in a .then after successful response, and that's when we update the state. So in this case, what does updating state means? It means add item to clothing items array. And that's basically it. The clothing items are already passed to that state is already passed to the components that need it. So really this ends what we need to do, and you close the modal. If you look here, it's very, very similar in shape. What are the differences? Well, instead of opening the modal and submitting the form, it's just open the modal and click the delete button. And yes, I'm still ignoring the confirmation modal because it is optional. We're not passing input values, we're passing the ID of the item that was opened. This component has access to that. It has access to the item just like it has to the ID, just like it has access to the name and the weather and the image URL. It has access to all that stuff. It's all in the same object. Passes the ID along to another handler in app.jsx. The handlers are rather similar in that they both make a fetch request. And the fetch request is in a function that we declare in the API file. We might call it, something like just delete item. And of course, we pass the ID along to this fetch request function instead of the input values. Now, this delete item function is going to look a little different from the add item function, of course. It's going to use the delete the delete method, it's going to put the ID in the URL instead of having a body. Those are the main differences. And of course, the exact details of how you handle the parameter slash arguments, that will change a little bit. But you can see how the shape of what we're doing is the same. So now we've got this response, this request that gets sent to the server. And from there, assuming it's successful, and I'm just assuming that for both of these cases, we get the response back to the delete item function. This response is going to have some JSON in it, but we probably don't really need to use the JSON. It's just going to be like a message that says success. And we don't need that to know if we were successful or not. Let me find, there we are, because we will just be checking if res.ok is true. And if res.ok is true, then we know that it's been successful. So we get back here. We need to update the state because, yes, by this point, it's already been deleted from the database. But we need to do something to make it so that it gets deleted from the application state so that it doesn't keep showing up on the page. We don't want to have to the user to have to manually reload the page. So this is where the trick comes, removing the deleted item. And what you have to do is compare the IDs. Compare the IDs of the ID of the clicked upon card and delete just the matching card item from the application state. And that's a little tricky. You use the filter function for that. So this is the whole architecture, and I would strongly encourage you to try to implement the full thing without watching this video, and ask for help in the Discord channels. But I will record a video with some additional assistance. I'll continue this video with some additional assistance, but I may not show the entire thing. Okay, so we can start on the right. This is where, in terms of the chain of actions, this is where it begins, in the item modal component. Now, since our, why is that empty? I don't know. Since the shape of what we're doing is very similar to up here, we might get some useful information by seeing how we handled it in the add item modal component. The relevant bit of information here is that in order to pass data, an argument, to our handler that's in app.jsx, we need to wrap it in another event handler. We can't just pass this as the onClick handler. It won't work because the argument of the handler of an event is always the event object, and it's not going to have the ID that we need. So, how do we enact that? Handle delete item, and we create that wrapping function. I'll just call it handle delete because we need to have a different name. I don't think it needs the event object at all. We don't have to prevent the default behavior or anything like that. It needs to call handle delete item. And I'm just going to pass the whole card because I happen to know that although we only need the ID at this point, only need the ID, and that the ID is in this card object, we will actually need more than the ID if you implement the confirmation modal. In most ways that you would do it, you might need the item itself. Although it depends on how you implement it, but still, we'll go with that. Handle delete item. Here's the card. That's got all the data we might need. We're gonna need a button to click. We don't have a button yet, so you'll have to do some styling. I'm not gonna do that. Button modal double underscore delete dash btn. And an on-click handler that we set to this handle delete function that we've declared. And this is basically all the setup that you would need inside this component. Next, moving to the left, app. Need to declare a handler. We'll need to do this stuff too, but we're going to follow the action. So app.jsx. The handler is going to look pretty similar to this, won't it? It's going to have a different argument, different function. There will be a lot of differences, but the shape is what is the same. So I just copy paste there and make some suitable adjustments. So how would we write this parameter? Try to think that through. Just going to delete that. We probably won't need, as I mentioned, we won't need the JSON data because it's just a message saying success. This is going to be different. Filter out the deleted item by its ID. So how do we handle the arguments and parameters? We have a card. We're passing the entire card here. This is going to be an object with an underscore ID property and some other properties. So we couldn't do something like this, ID. Couldn't do that. Because then card would be the entire ID, or it would be the entire object. We would have to access the ID like this, and that would be silly. We could destructure the ID, which is not a bad idea. But as I said, we might actually need the entire card data, so we'd need to adjust it. I'm gonna call it item, just to emphasize the fact that the name that we give it here and here, this does not matter. This name, when we're declaring a function, is arbitrary. And I think that item is an even better name. Card, that's not what we're calling these. We're calling these clothing items. So I was being a little inconsistent with this naming, but oh well. So we've got the item. It's got the ID in it. This function just needs the ID. So we could do item._id. Item._id. Just like that. Now we will need to pass as a prop to where it needs to go. And I'm not delete item submit because we're not submitting anything. That was false analogy. So at this point we've got this function. Oh, we don't want to call the add item function. We're trying to delete an item, not add an item. So we need a new function called delete item in our API file. We could start with what we have here. What changes are going to be needed? Well, we've already mentioned a few. Different parameter. ID instead of the other things, the object. It's going to be just the ID. Different method. No body is necessary. And then finally, ID needs to get embedded in the URL. Embed the ID in the URL. Refer to your previous Spots project implementation. It's the same basic idea. You'll use a template literal here. So this is a to-do for you. I'm leaving more to-dos in this case because it's important for you to do this stuff on your own. So here, at this point, if you get all of this stuff set up correctly, what you should find is that cards will be deleted from db.json. So you'll see that the card that you clicked on will no longer be in the db.json file, but it will still be there on the web page until you refresh the page. That's how you'll know that you have succeeded so far. Now, so this needs to get passed as a prop. Probably going to need to import this, that should go without saying. That's the sort of thing that you just need to figure out. The final part here is how to filter out a deleted item by its ID. So the thing is, so this is the ID that you have access to, right? There's a method, filter, MDN. This is the method that we'll use. This is the syntax. I'm just going to copy that and come down here. And how can we make this work? So let's see let's say we have a clothing items array. And it is an array of objects. And these objects have an ID property and they have some other properties in them that aren't relevant here. It's just the ID property that is relevant. And so we've got a bunch of things in this array. How can we use the filter method to filter out a particular item? So let's say we want to filter out this one. Task is to filter out item with ID 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a string. The way this would work is, so A, filter returns a new array. That's important. Call it whatever you want. You call it on the array you want to filter. The argument of the callback function is going to be an item of that array. So it's iterative, and it's going to step through the array. It's going to the first time it calls, this will be item. Then this will be item. Then this will be item. The callback function needs to return a Boolean that that returns true. That returns true for all items you want to keep. Which means for all items you want to remove, the callback function needs to return false. I'm going to expand this so that we have a multi-line to make it clear that we need to be returning a value. Basically what you need to do here, and so we could do it in this particular case using the literal 1, 2, 3. We could do if item dot underscore ID equals 1, 2, 3, 4, the string 1, 2, 3, 4, actually not equals. And because I'm realizing that this might cause you a bit of confusion because of how parameters are named, we'll just call this something different because we can call this whatever we want. So this line of code here will return an array that has all the items in the array that don't have this ID. This is basically what you need to do. Very, very close to what you actually need to do. The difference is that you can't use like a literal string like that. So there's your task. I know this is more challenging than a lot of the other ones because I'm not showing how to do it, but I am confident that you have the skills in order to pull this together. And if you run into more issues, feel free to reach out on the hub.